This is the Zemar Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch Zemar.
So we're going to talk about giving up too early. A lot of people do this in many areas of life. We just kind of give up. It usually takes much longer than we planned, wanted, expected, for whatever the reason, but there are reasons behind some of this, but some of it's outside of our control, some of it is inside of our control, and some of it's just part of the process. So I'm going to walk through some of those on this podcast, and these are, just some of the reasons. There's many reasons that it happens. It's coming up, either some of them could be excuses, some of them could be legitimate reasons, but I thought I would walk through some of these, because obviously people go through tough times and they have to persevere, and then somehow you get on the other side, and sometimes you're amazed you even got there. One of the reasons that people give up way too soon is definitely due to our attention spans and expectations. We always think it'll take less time than it really does, and in time you could see other people that already been down a path. They probably do it in less time. But they've also been through the path that it took more time. There's challenges and difficulties that will persist for many different reasons, and again, inside of our control and outside of our control along the way. They will result in lessons learned, and sometimes the lesson is not ready yet. You're not ready to learn the lesson. That's why sometimes when you reread books, you just rediscover things that you didn't pay attention or even come up with. Part of it was the lessons learned wasn't there yet, and it's part of the whole process. Then there's things that we just didn't anticipate, right? And so the example I always give for my boys is that you're not late because of the train, but it's because you weren't expecting it, so therefore you didn't plan for it. You could develop injuries or some other setbacks along the way that could delay that progress. And these are just to name a couple of them. Sometimes the timing just isn't right. It isn't right for you or the situation. Up till that point where it's ready, it'll all come together. Sometimes it will happen too early, and sometimes it'll happen much later. And there's a lot of things that go into it, whatever your goals are or task or expectations. Sometimes along the way, the course changes, and it could be because of new information, old information. It could be a fork in the road that causes a change in directions. One example of this is kind of just the weather and how it changes, right? So that could change the outcome of what's there. Not just, obviously, if you have goals and tasks, weather is just a small piece of it, but that was just, metaphorically just an example of change a fork in the road. So one example, even in a personal life, is that when I was growing up, I always wanted to be an astronaut. So I read probably every astronaut book in the public school library that I was attending in the suburbs of Chicago. And they were all the old school books, but I didn't know that until many, many, many years later. It talked about, the path to astronaut program is through the military, usually in an aviation format. Not always, but most of them. If you look at those who are even on the Apollo missions or even the Mercury missions, all of them almost 100% of them came from the military in some capacity. So that was the route I was going to go. And so I literally signed up for the military and said, this is what we're going to do. Now, I was misguided. Imagine that, a Navy recruiter misinforming you, but I also didn't know the path, and so that created issues. And so but then I came to the realization after I was in that I took the long route to get there, and either I can keep going, but it'll be a long time before I get in the astronaut program, or I could just change directions. And that happens with many things in life. There's times that you're just not ready for that goal, right? Or you're not ready to achieve it. You think you are, but life itself and your surroundings does not match your desire for it. One example is lotto winners, right? Everybody wants to win the lotto. And this is a great example. Everybody wants to win the lotto. You put your money on the table, you get a ticket, and you win here, you win there. But the big winners, many of them go bankrupt. They run out all the money that they won. It could be millions of dollars, and they still blow it all. And because a lot of lessons that need to be learned to handle $1 million wasn't achieved yet. So therefore, the money management skills weren't there. The persona isn't there, and so they lose all the money. So we see this in youth sports a lot, and it can be translated to business too, where your resume sounds greater than what your ability is. I'm not saying you would lie, it's perception, right? So it's kind of like trying out for a team higher than the level that your kid was playing for because you think your kid is better, and maybe they are to some capacity, but it is higher. So you try out and somehow you do make the team, whatever, you went out there, you performed your best, and somehow you made the list for one reason or another, right? But then you have to sustain it. So a lot of kids I've seen, and in business too, where people get put into roles that they don't have the experience yet or the talent or ability to be there, but they rise to the challenge and then they keep going. And this is okay because you're going to make mistakes along the way, and that's okay. Most places, like including sports, good coaches will see this, right? They want you to make mistakes. They want you to grow. They want you to learn, because by the end of the season, you're going to be a different person. But and the same thing goes with business and projects, right? You might be too young, too new, too inexperienced, too whatever, or too much experience in another direction. But by the time you guys finish the project or path that you're going on, somehow you come out on the other side and you're a different person. You're a different, perspective on it. And so, and then the opposite is true, where they just don't, they can't sustain it. So they start to stand out there in the playing season, and sometimes players end up going back the way they used to play instead of playing up, and that becomes an issue. And so it happens all the time. So sometimes you're in a place that you just shouldn't be because the talent, you're not ready to be there. And the same thing with the lotto winners. Even when I first entered this health insurance business 21 years ago, and I was told you could make $150,000 straight commission in the first year. Well, that first year I made $7,000, and this is all gross commissions. These are not split to the house and the agent. These were gross commissions. And so first year I made $7,000. The second year was $15,000. The third year was $36,000. And so again, even reflecting back on it now, I wasn't ready for it. There was a lot of lessons to be had. Some of it was maturity, some of it was discipline, some of it was marketing tactics and relationships and connections. There was a number of reasons. I see a lot of early 20-year-olds now in the business world, and they're doing far better than I am, not only just income-wise, but persona and lessons learned and what activity levels they're supposed to be. So I just took the long route, apparently, right? And so, but you fast forward, like even now I have a great, team of great people, we have partners, that we have to manage expectations and results on, and I'm still learning along the way, right? And so, there's that phrase that a lot of entrepreneurs, they build a plane, they jump off a cliff and they build a plane on the way down. It's a lot like that, and sometimes you just have to relearn how to fly along the way. And it happens almost every day sometimes, where you're changing course, you have to, something's not working, you have to fly a different way. Same goes with parenting. We all know that, like most parents, mothers are usually the one that takes the brunt of it, where with newborns, they're stressful and all this things to maintain, a newborn. When they're first born, some parents go through mental breakdowns, right? And then as they grow, you grow with them. And, there's no parent guide for this. Sure, there's some books out there that kind of give advice, but it's from their perspective, right? It doesn't match your kid, your situation, your personality, when you're trying to raise these kids. And over time, you adapt and you learn and keep going. And usually most caring parents usually end up doing just fine when their kids are old enough to move out. Like there's a little glimmer of hope. And then Of course, there's also the glimmer of worry that, they're going to do the right things, but usually it all pans out just fine. So despite all the trouble or self-doubt that you experience along the way. So leading to self-doubt, right? We all have it. And this is another reason people quit any task or goal or expectations. And so it could hold you back, right, from the success that you're actually looking for. Ask any Olympian, business owner, parent, and I assure you that they have a story about when they were about to quit and give up because of self-doubt. I'm sure you could count or recount times that you were going to give up yourself along the way just because you just wanted to quit. You wanted to just throw in the towel, whatever it might be. I know I did, and I could, there's many times that it's actually happened. The situation's the boss, right? So when I was in the Navy, we persevered to get airplanes back up in the air. We did have issues. We had a lot of airplanes down. That airplane was so old. It was decommissioned now for many, many, many years, but it was still alive and in operation when we were there, but we were having troubles, right? I couldn't tell you how many times we just failed trying to figure out what this is. We had so many people involved in the project and we still couldn't figure it out. And even when we did resolve it, there wasn't one thing that actually solved that problem. And but the issue was I was too young and naive to have any self-doubt. We just persevered, let alone the bigger lesson that was involved wasn't there until later, reflecting back on it. Well, I was training for a 50-mile run. My first 16-mile training run, killed my legs for days after. Like, it actually gave me a huge amount of self-doubt that I was not going to complete this 50-mile run. Of course, I didn't even run 26 at this point. I had no interest. I still don't have interest in 26. I'd rather run 30 than 26. And so I actually really thought after that run that was going to be the end of my story, right? Definitely some serious self-doubt there, and it was so much pain to run 50 miles. And I have gone to run multiple 30-mile runs, usually unofficially. Those were training runs or fun runs, if you want to call it that. I completed one 50-mile run, and so obviously gone past the 16-mile run to the point where 16 miles were training runs along the way, part of the training schedule. And then if we go back in time to when the Affordable Care Act came in, and then it was in full force, our commissions were slashed. And the business model that I was in at the moment, right, took the biggest hit of the industry, not just me, but across the board throughout brokers throughout the United States in that market space. And so I had self-doubts about the industry, about staying in the industry, had no idea. Some people think that the Affordable Care Act was going to go away. Some of them were going to say that it's doomsday for insurance agents. They had to retool and refigure out. And there were some definitely severe hardships in there for myself and my family, and not just financially, but from a personal development standpoint. My confidence really tanked, right? And so there's obviously some self-doubt. But even if you fast forward 12 years from the full implementation of Affordable Care Act, I still have self-doubt. I grew from a one-person shop 12 years ago to we're closer to 10 outside of any partner relationships or pending mergers that might be at play, up to triple the size of the agency. Those are all successes for sure. But I still have doubts, right? I still have not only doubts with the deals, but also doubts with confidence and how things are going to go, right? But, obviously we just keep plugging away. We learn along the way. I try to journal, make notes, mental thoughts, recapping on things. And I keep trying to do self-improvement, but we just keep going, just like I did with the 16-mile run that set me back, and I thought I was going to quit, but just kept going. I'm also part of an industry association that aids our relationship with the federal government for advocacy, even local for state too. So we have a event coming up locally for the association. So I recently put my name to either moderate or be on a panel for them. Obviously, I want to volunteer. I got some intellectual knowledge about the space. Maybe I can, move it in, right? And so the board allowed me to be the moderator of that panel, Well, what's interesting, it was I guess it was a hands down decision. So, I mean, that's confidence, right? That I'm persevered over the last 12 years, that there's confidence in a board meeting to select me as the moderator. But even from that same association, not aside from this event, I occasionally receive calls from other members that ask me questions on how to grow or close business or situations that come up, right? And so even though I have my self-doubts, I still made progress. And although I'm grateful for the progress that's there, I'm still not satisfied with the progress. It's definitely taken me a much longer, slower process than I ever anticipated. Part of that is definitely me bottlenecking the situation. And the other parts are just situations that we had to learn and address and persevere and push through and get to another level. You too will have your own self-doubts. You have to figure out how to keep moving. You have to start by showing up every single day and sticking to it. I can't tell you how many days during this time when the Affordable Care Act was fully implemented that I would stare off into space trying to figure out what to do next, right? There was a lot of wasted time there in that time frame, and that was a lesson learned by itself. And I'm sure you'll have those days too in your business and personal life. I definitely encourage journaling your process. It's one thing to actually remind yourself in the journal about your goals. That's just one piece of it, but also the action steps to get you there. But not only the action steps, but very specific on when it's going to start or when those action steps are needed. I learned through journaling that just because you write your goals doesn't mean anything. It doesn't accomplish things. It does keep them fresh in your mind. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you write journals enough and you just write your goals over and over again. If you look back over an 18-month or 24-month period, you probably achieved a lot of them. There is that. But I'm just saying from a aggressive, get-ahead type mentality, overachieving, it's not going to get you the result. It's a passive result. So you need not only to even put the action steps, because I can't tell you how many times, okay, I'm gonna write 10 pieces of business in the next 30 days, and here's how I'm gonna do it. And I write it all out and say, I'll do it through podcasting or webinars or LinkedIn posts or calling people, whatever it might be, and I'll write it all out and I close the book, and that's it. Boom, it's done, right? But I'm telling you, you actually have to put forth and put timelines on it, put it in your calendar, actually execute and make it an appointment in the calendar so that it actually gets done. If it's not in the calendar, a lot of times it doesn't get done. And so you have to put it in there, and you have to have the action step, and you have to be very clear. I've also done time blocking where I would block out certain times of the day and it'd be too generic. And guess what? Since it was too generic, too broad, it didn't happen. So you have to be very specific on the actual task that needs to be done. You can take your goals and work them backwards where you are today and break it down and make it easier. So I have in-laws that do a lot of golfing. And apparently when I had married my wife, I always joked that there was fine print and agreement that I didn't know until after the marriage that I have to take this annual trip out to far west Nebraska. It's almost no man's land, let me tell you. It's just like in the middle of nowhere, and it's very far west. So the panhandle of Nebraska is real, and it's long, and so and it's hot, and so I don't regret going out there at all. We haven't been there since really COVID. We need to get back out there. She's bugging me for it, but anyhow, so there's these golfers, they're farm boys, and so a lot of times the phrases and words that they use, usually are mostly funny because it's coming from them. If you come to the city and repeat some of those, they look at you like, what did you just say? One of the things that they offer always words of encouragement, whether you typically have a bad game or you're having one at that point when you're golfing, is any progress is good progress, right? So the same goes with goals too, is you're trying to move ahead. You're trying to accomplish things that maybe you've never done before, maybe bigger than anybody have done before, or maybe they're small, but they're your goals, right? And so any progress is good progress. Just start, keep moving, just make it that you just keep active at this. You will make it there if you just don't quit. You just got to keep going. You'll get better along the way. It'll move faster. And that's why when you look at some of these people that have been there and done that already, it seems like they're much more proficient at it. It's because they already went through what you're about to go through. The other reason that people give up is usually the journey is long and it's lonely. And so it gives people enough reason to quit just from that alone, right? It changes course too often. It's too lonely. You have self-doubt that because now you have time to think about things because there's no one else there to share it with. It's like that. They always say that there's no traffic on the extra mile. And some people like they never get that far to actually know that feeling. It's like doing a long run if you're a runner. It gets lonely out there, especially when your podcast dies. I did a lot of running without it, but when their podcast dies and you still have miles left, it's just the best music is the one between your ears, and sometimes it could be a little bit challenging because self-doubt and you start beating yourself up. Part of it, you're alone in that path is because it's very unique and personal to you only, right? It's something that you created that you want to accomplish and no one else has ever even thought about it. I'm not saying from a new invention, but your own personal goal based on your situation. It could also be with the people that you associate with, right? It's where you're at today is not where you're going to be tomorrow. So therefore, the people you're associating yourself with I've never been there, so you'll be alone just because you're going down a path that no one else has done. But you'll have to change your surroundings at some point, right? There will be people that will have to change over time. I associate with people today that are vastly different than people I associated with 10 to 15 years ago, or even 2 to 3 years ago in some cases. They kind of drift. You see the difference, and then eventually it just, a lot of times it's mutual. You're still friends, but it's not who you're really associating with, right? Change happens, right? And there's nothing wrong with this, right? We just learn, we move on, and we keep going. But sometimes people have to stick around, and that's okay. You just have to find a common ground with them so that you can kind of get along. Family members are a great example of this. You can't get rid of them. They'll always be there. You just have to find the common ground and stay away from things that leaves either you or them uncomfortable about topics, especially about goals and accomplishments that are there, because you may be far ahead of them at this point, or maybe you're not, and then it creates a discrepancy. So you got to find a common ground. You have to stay positive. I know it gets lonely out there, but you definitely have to stay positive. But one thing I've learned along the way of this path is you have to remind yourself why you're doing it and what's your purpose, right? You have to have a purpose. And remind yourself of the action steps that you need to take in order to get there, right? We tend to drift. It's almost like that extra mile doesn't have guardrails. So eventually you start drifting because you're like, oh, that tree over there looks kind of cool. And then all of a sudden you're waving on the road to your success, right? And so that creates a little bit of an issue, and all of a sudden you could be off the path, right? If there's no lines on the road, how do you know you still keep going straight? It's the same thing when you're scuba diving. Sometimes if the terrain underwater is all the same, how do you know you're kicking in the same direction? You could actually drift a little bit if you have a leg that's stronger than another one, or you turn around often enough to check to see if your buddy's there. All of a sudden you can be in a different direction. Sometimes your just mind starts wandering and you accidentally head into a different direction along your path to success. This is definitely one I'm still working on personally. It's hard when you get to certain levels, or every level. It doesn't matter where you're at. It's always a challenge, and you're always trying to, think about better possibilities, and that veers off. It's almost like daydreaming in a car, and you missed your exit. The other thing, though, is definitely, even though we talked about the association of people, may have to change over a period of time, but there's some people you have to keep close, and in order to not be lonely, you have to include them. And so I know one of my failures along the way is having conversations with Julie, my wife, because you fast forward 21 years, and there's literally almost 21 years of experiences and setbacks and successes that she's not even aware of because I didn't share it. And a lot of relationships are like this. I just, it's kind of like that emotional setting that you just don't want to revisit sometimes, or you just don't want to repeat it. And so, I didn't want to waste her time, talk about the naysayers or the failures, or brag about successes. But what I'm learning even today is that they're one of your biggest support systems, right? And so I have a lot of years to catch up with her, and so we're in for an up and down ride to catch up for both of us, and it probably will be a little bit better to share that path with somebody that actually cares and has support for you. And so, and I'm sure she'll listen, and I'm sure some things will not agree with, but I appreciate her even being there. So no matter what you do, though, you'll always have these naysayers. And from my experience, initially you'll have the naysayers that are close to you. It's going to be soft and subtle, and it'll be innocent. They're going to say, hey, why you're doing that way, or why would you go down the tough path? And I know when I first got in the business, my father didn't understand I was selling health insurance versus auto and home necessarily. I don't know, just didn't put the connection that they were separated. He was telling me I should just go work for State Farm or something, and State Farm didn't really sell health insurance at the time. And maybe they did a little bit, but still it wasn't a market for it. They dominate in the auto home world, and they do other insurance products. But my dad was the naysayer, just saying you should go try somewhere else. Yeah, I mean, sure, I would have had a better system, learn how to sell, learn how to prospect, learn how to close business, all that stuff related to specific insurance. But you're going to have those naysayers. They feel like they care enough about you to give that input, and I think that's great to some degree, because you can learn from those lessons, learn from those conversations, because you could take a golden nugget with you. But those are going to be tough conversations too, and you're going to try to avoid them, and in some cases you really should, but they're going to remind you why your path is unnecessary, why you shouldn't be doing it. It's tougher. You don't need to be doing it that way or that goal, right? And no one else has ever accomplished it and all this stuff, because they don't know, right? You may read about many people accomplishing things in your industry, your personal life, and then some of the people that are giving you naysaying comments are not necessarily aware of those, right? And so you're going to have to deal with that. And a lot of times, whatever you're doing is going to be hard, and the people that love you are going to try to make it easier for you, right? And so, but it's definitely about keeping the commitment to keep you going so you don't quit, right? These alone are not enough to quit, but they could be, right? There could be enough reasons that your spouse or significant other or sibling or parent comes to you and says, or business partner or whoever it might be, and they give you specific reasons that are very justifiable why you should quit. And you should consider those, but definitely persevering, because it's a goal of yours, right? If you talk to any sport athlete, business person, anybody in academics, they will always tell you that there's always personal sacrifices that come along the way. And these are one of those things that you're going to have to consider when you have these conversations with these people that care about you and giving you advice, because you may have to make a personal sacrifice to meet the goal. But every single one of them will tell you that there is definitely, even when I was training for the 50-mile run, one of my personal sacrifices I had to make was less time with the family on the weekend, because those were long runs. I had to start earlier just so I could fit it in, so I could have some of the day with them. Otherwise, some of these long runs could take, hours, right? So if you start at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to see them until dinner. And so, especially with commuting time, depending on where you're going for the run, like there's some personal sacrifices. So you have to consider those and make sure the people that you care about are on the same page, even though they may disagree. Most of the time, they try to recommendations to stop or to change in a different direction because of their own opinion. Many will try to give that opinion so they can, and they're going to push that opinion on you just so that you could stop, right? It's their opinion of you or their own opinion of them. But at the same time, some people will actually give you this advice because they don't want to see you exceed or succeed rather. And many times I've learned this, it's very subconscious. Like if you called them out and had a heart-to-heart conversation, they would probably never realize they're actually doing this in most cases, or many of the cases. But there are times where that they're telling you this because they don't want you to succeed. They don't want to see it because they didn't do it. They don't want you to surpass them. And so they want to keep you at the same level. And then after a while, when you get past those close people to you trying to give you reasons to stop your quest, then you'll have what I call the noise naysayers, right? The noise naysayers come out of the woodwork. Many of them you don't even know. They're trying to tear your product apart. They're going to try to tear you apart, your services, your goals, whatever it might be. These come out of the woodwork. I can't tell you how many times people told me to not train for a 50-mile run. And a lot of them I didn't even know. Like, I don't know why they cared enough to even tell me, but they did. And so they will tell you the same thing over and over again and try to put you at a disadvantage. Sometimes they'll tell other people about you and the negativity of the goal or accomplishment or product or service that you're trying to provide and gives you a disadvantage. I had some prospects that would tell me that they heard about something from me that was completely false because the world gets small after a certain point. And then you have an uphill battle to try to at least clear the name, let alone even get the business. I remember one time when something did come up, when a topic did come up in a meeting, I gave this quick disgusted look for a second or two. Then I just grabbed my laptop, my stuff, and started packing the bags. And I grabbed my jacket. The prospect that I was working with was completely shocked. Then I stood up and I just said, here's the issue. If you're going to believe something that has no validation or proof, then I don't want your business as a client. And they were in complete shock and asked me, well, what is the truth then, right? So I told him my side of the story in the situation, and he was in disbelief that it was even an issue or even had to be said to him. And I gave him my regards and I walked out. And it was a dispute with another broker in the industry at a meeting that I disagreed with something that he was saying. So he leveraged that and made it something that it really wasn't. And so, well, a week later, that prospect called me, and they were clients of mine until they sold and retired. So there's definitely a lot of accomplishments, but you get setbacks along the way, and it's about not quitting, right? And so in recent events, Alex Ovechkin from the Washington Capitals just broke Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal-scoring record, not the points, but the actual goals. Ovi tied the record one game short of the great one and ended up surpassing him in the next game, passing up Wayne Gretzky. It's an amazing achievement for anyone. It's definitely, there's not a close gap between first and second or third. They're spread out when you get to the top like that. But I'm pretty sure if you asked him 2 years ago if he was going to do it, he would probably say, no way, it's too far off, right? And he had his self-doubts. Even, I'm sure, going into the season, he had self-doubts. On top of that, he actually had injuries throughout the season, and I'm sure that gave him some self-doubt, right? And so, plus this guy's the great one, right? And everybody's heard of Wayne Gretzky. He's been this great athlete, hockey player for many years, and most kids know who he is, that especially if they're around the sport of hockey. But as time goes on, the stats are starting to come out. It's only really about a week old, but one thing that I had noticed where his goal percentage was only 13%. So of the shots he made, 13%. He's actually the most number of shots on net, at least in comparison to Wayne Gretzky. So he's had more shots on net, more opportunities. So his goal and scoring percentage was 13%, while Wayne Gretzky was at 17%. But based on these stat people, they claim that the elite is at 15%. So OV wasn't even considered elite based on the stats. He wasn't even a disciplined athlete, and I'm not saying that's negative. I think he could have done a lot better, but I'm not trying to criticize somebody that just achieved an all-time great opportunity. But I have read that he brings Diet Coke to the bench instead of drinking water. He skips workouts, right? And he's the first one to crack open a beer at the end of the game, which are all fantastic and builds the character for who he is, and it works for him. But he persevered and came out to be one of the greatest goal scorers in the history of NHL. But above all, he had teammates that worked with him. He had NHL athletes that supported him, right? It's just an awesome achievement in general. But this also leaves me to the last reason I'm going to leave you with is one reason people quit, or the one reason you stay in the game, is definitely about a number of factors. So I'm going to go through some of these and kind of recap, because I'm sure OV had to go through some of the things that we already talked about, and there's probably many things that he had to go through that we didn't even talk about, and I'm not going to take any of those away because they're all important along the way, and it is for you too. But one of the things that had to be in place to make it work was team. And he is definitely emphasizing team and sportsmanship. I mean, there was one game he called his entire team out of the locker room tunnel to make sure that they all greeted one of the goalies from the other team because he was retiring that season, and he's achieved such great accomplishments as a goalie. So we want to make sure everybody went out there because that was the last time they were ever going to face them. And so, at least for the season. And so, I think that's just, he supports team effort, right? The team has to be on the same page. The team has to get along, right? You have to figure out a way to work, right? The team has to have a goal. The team, including Ovi, had to be unselfish. End of story. You have to be unselfish, and whether it's in sports or if it's in business, you have to have an unselfish team. The team had to give him enough passes to sit in his office. His office was one slot on the ice that he was there most of the time. People could probably cherry pick it, but somehow he was able to make it work throughout his career. It was definitely a team effort, right? And the best of it all is that Ovi recognized this, right? When his goalie congratulated him on achieving this, Ovi said you had at least 5 assists logged, for those goals, right? Which was true because the article I was reading that emphasized that there was some truth to this. And Ovi was trying to give him credit for passing the puck because he could have passed it to anybody, but he gave it to him and he got the goal, right? Which contributed to that goal. He was giving him credit to help him achieve that goal. It's an amazement when you have the team behind you and you're giving credit back because it's very unselfish. So whatever the goal is, whatever the task, whatever the endeavor, right? You have 1 million reasons or more to actually quit and then avoid any other possibility for success on this. You only need one good reason to keep you going, the one that gives you purpose. And you need a lot of other things to align it, but if you have your purpose, you'll make it if you just don't quit.